My son said I should be grateful that he even answered my calls. He said it in a cold way, as if I were a problem to manage, not his mother who had sacrificed everything for him. I could hear my daughter-in-law's soft laughter in the background. But before I continue, check to see if you have already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? Mum, you should be grateful that we even answer your calls, Richard, my only son, said, with that condescending tone he had adopted with me over the last few years. I stayed silent, gripping the phone tightly, while I listened to Carla, my daughter-in-law, chuckling quietly in the background. A laugh that told me everything I needed to know about what they really thought of me. Grateful? I finally repeated. For what exactly? For everything we're doing for you, the impatient voice replied. Managing your accounts, paying your bills, organizing your life. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing if you would just let us handle everything. I wanted to remind him that for 40 years I was a chief accountant at a major Chicago hospital, that I raised 2 children alone after my husband passed away, that I balanced family budgets during times of galloping inflation. But instead, I just took a deep breath. I didn't realize I needed to demonstrate gratitude because you were doing something you offered to do. Mum, Carla interrupted, with her artificially sweet voice. You yourself said you were getting confused with all the numbers. We're just helping like you asked. But I had never said that. I never asked for that help. It started subtly, a few months after I moved closer to them following my retirement. First, it was the suggestion to put accounts on automatic debit. Then came the idea of a power of attorney just for emergencies. Afterward, papers to sign during Sunday brunch, always presented in a hurry, always when I was distracted. I'm going to hang up now, I replied, surprisingly calm. We'll talk later. When I hung up the phone, the house felt too quiet. I prepared a tea and sat at the kitchen table where I had so often helped Richard with his homework, where I had planned birthdays, calculated budgets, written cards to my late husband, Charles. What hurt the most wasn't their distrust of my capability, but the cruelty disguised as care. You should be grateful. As if my existence was a burden they were generously enduring. The next morning, I called the bank. After going through several security confirmations, the employee informed me that my mailing address had been changed 6 months ago. Now, all my statements were being sent directly to Richard and Carla's address in Dallas, Texas. And are there any automatic transfers set up on my account? I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. Yes, ma'am. There is a monthly transfer to a joint account in the name of Richard and Carla Morales. It started in February. The amount she mentioned was almost half of my retirement. Money I didn't know was being withdrawn, month after month, silently. Was that authorized by me? I asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, ma'am. It was digitally approved through your online access. I then remembered an afternoon, 3 months ago, when Richard came over to help with the computer. He stood behind me, guiding where to click, what to approve. It's just to update the security system, Mum. Trust me. And I trusted. How could I not trust my own son? Hanging up, I stared at the garden through the kitchen window. The hydrangeas I planted last year were blooming, strong and vibrant. I had grown them from scratch, carefully, patiently, just as I had raised my children, just as I had built my life. In that moment, something changed inside me. It wasn't rage exactly. It was more like waking up from a long sleep. I saw with crystal clarity what was happening. It wasn't protection. It was appropriation. It wasn't care. It was control. And I realized I had a choice. I could continue to be the docile, grateful mother they wanted me to be, slowly fading away while they managed my life until the end. or I could show them exactly who I was. The woman who survived losing her husband at age 43, raised 2 children alone, worked 2 jobs to pay for college, and became the first woman to reach the position of Chief Financial Officer at St. Mary's Hospital. The next day, I put on my best clothes, a navy suit I saved for special occasions. I put on my lipstick and took a cab downtown. My destination was not the local bank where Richard had kindly helped me set everything up. It was the Bank of America in San Francisco, where I had opened my first account 4 decades ago. It was time to take my life back, one document at a time. The bank manager, Mr. Johnson, was a man in his 50s, with kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He listened to my story attentively, without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Miller, what you are describing is much more common than we would like," he said when I finished. "It's called elder financial abuse, and we have seen a significant increase in recent years." Abuse. The word hit me like a slap. It was ugly, harsh, definitive, but it was accurate. "What can I do?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "We can start by blocking the automatic transfers and revoking the digital access your son has to your account. We are going to issue new cards and passwords and change the mailing address back to yours." He hesitated, adjusting his glasses. "I must warn you that your son will likely be notified of these changes by the system." "Let him be notified," I replied, feeling a determination I hadn't experienced in years. I have nothing to hide. As Mr. Johnson worked on the computer, implementing the changes I had requested, I thought about how I had reached this point. How my son, that little boy I had cradled in my arms, transformed into someone capable of treating me this way. It was gradual, I realized. It began shortly after I moved closer to them, 3 years ago. Small comments about how I was confused about dates. Exaggerated concerns when I forgot something trivial. Small offers of help that, looking back, were the first steps toward assuming control. "All set, Mrs. Miller, all done," Mr. Johnson said, bringing me back to reality. "The password for your new card will arrive in a separate mailing. We have also blocked any attempt to access your account without your physical presence and identification here at the branch." He handed me a card. "This is Dr. Jennifer Salas, an attorney specializing in elder rights. I strongly suggest you consult her. She can help with other protective measures that go beyond what we can do here at the bank." I thanked him and put the card in my purse. On the way home, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief for taking the first steps to regain my autonomy. Sadness because those steps were necessary. The phone was already ringing when I walked into the house. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again 10 minutes later. And again. On the 6th call, I finally answered. "Mum, what the heck did you do?" His voice was shaking with anger. "I just got notifications from the bank saying my access to your account was revoked and the transfers were cancelled." "Yes," I replied calmly. "I made some changes today." "Changes? You can't just do that. We had an agreement." "What agreement, Richard? The one where you transferred my money to your account without telling me? Or the one where you changed my mailing address so I would never see my own bank statements?" Silence on the other end. Then his voice changed, adopting that conciliatory tone I was beginning to hate. "Mum, you're confused. We talked about this, remember? You agreed it would be simpler if we managed everything for you." "I never agreed to that," I replied firmly. "I never agreed to you withdrawing half of my retirement every month. I never agreed to you hiding my bank documents from me." "It's for your own good," he finally burst out. "Do you think you can handle everything, alone at your age?" You didn't even notice what we were doing for 6 months. His brutal honesty was almost refreshing. Finally, the true face behind the mask of concern. I didn't notice because I trusted you, I replied. That was my mistake. I'm not going to repeat it. What does that mean? He asked, his voice suddenly cautious. It means I'm taking back control of my finances, and if I discover more things you did without my knowledge or consent, I will take the necessary measures. Measures? Are you threatening me, Mum? I'm informing you of my decision, Richard. As an adult to an adult. He laughed, a cold, incredulous sound. Sure. We'll see how long this lasts before you're begging for our help again. After hanging up, my hands were shaking so much I could barely prepare a tea. Not from fear, but from a pent-up fury I hadn't felt in decades. The last time was when Richard's school principal suggested that, as a single mother, maybe I didn't have the structure to raise a boy properly. On that occasion, I had defended my right to be a mother. Now I was defending my right to be a person. The next day, I called Dr. Jennifer Salas and scheduled a consultation. While waiting for the date, I systematically began to investigate what else Richard and Carla had done without my knowledge. I checked drawers, folders, old documents. What I found left me cold. The deed to my house in Boston, which Charles and I had bought 30 years ago with so much sacrifice, now included Richard's name as a joint owner. My life insurance policy, which originally had my 2 children as equal beneficiaries, now listed only Richard and Carla. Even my funeral plan had been altered, from a traditional burial as I wanted to a quick, cheap cremation. It was as if they weren't just stealing from me while I was alive, but also erasing my wishes for after death. As I organized those documents in a folder, the phone rang. It was my daughter, Lisa, who lived in another state. Mum, what's going on? Richard just called me saying you're acting weird, making accusations. I took a deep breath. It was time to shed more light on this situation. Lisa, your brother has been transferring my money to his account without my knowledge. He altered documents for my house and insurance without consulting me. When I found out and confronted him, he said I should be grateful that he even answered my calls. Silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice came in, low and concerned. Oh my gosh, Mum. Are you sure? Absolutely. I have bank statements, transfer records, everything documented. He said you're confused, that you're imagining things. Of course he said that, I thought. That's how it starts. Questioning the person's sanity, making everyone question their perception of reality. Lisa, I worked with numbers all my life. I may be older, but I know how to recognize when someone is diverting my money. I heard her take a deep breath. I'm booking a flight to New York tomorrow. I need to see this with my own eyes. When I hung up, I felt the first glimmer of hope in days. Regardless of what happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone anymore. Dr. Jennifer Salas's office was exactly like her, elegant, direct, and without unnecessary frills. Sitting behind a dark wood desk, she listened intently while I explained my situation, with Lisa by my side for moral support. My daughter had arrived the night before, and after examining the documents I had collected, she was horrified. What Richard did, Dr. Salas said when I finished, constitutes elder financial abuse. It is both a crime and a civil offence. The good news is that you acted quickly and we have substantial evidence. What are our options? Lisa asked, holding my hand. We can proceed on several fronts. First, we need to officially revoke any power of attorney Richard may have. Second, legally contest the changes to the house deed and insurance policies, which were made without informed consent. Third, we can file a civil lawsuit to recover the diverted funds. The attorney paused, looking directly at me. There is also the option of filing a criminal complaint. What your son did is fraud. The word hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. Fraud. Crime. My own son. I want back what is mine, I finally said. But I don't know if I want to see my son in jail. Dr. Salas nodded understandingly. Many families feel the same way. We can start with the civil measures and see how Richard responds. If he cooperates, returns the funds, and signs the necessary revocations, perhaps we can avoid the criminal path. We left the office with a clear plan of action and a renewed sense of purpose. Lisa, who was always the peacemaker in the family, was quietly furious. I never imagined Richard would do something like this, she said as she drove back to my house. I always thought Carla was materialistic, but this is another level. People do terrible things when they think they're in the right, I replied, looking out the window at the passing trees, and when they think no one is watching. That night, Lisa and I reviewed more documents, finding even more evidence of the gradual control Richard had assumed over my financial life. Credit cards opened in my name, utility accounts transferred to his address, even an initial consultation with a real estate agent about selling my house, all without my knowledge. It was as if they weren't just stealing from me while I was alive, but also erasing my wishes for after death. As I organized those documents in a folder, the phone rang. It was my daughter, Lisa, who lived in another state. "Mom, what's going on? Richard just called me saying you're acting weird, making accusations." I took a deep breath. It was time to shed more light on this situation. "Lisa, your brother has been transferring my money to his account without my knowledge. He altered documents for my house and insurance without consulting me. When I found out and confronted him, he said I should be grateful that he even answered my calls." Silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice came in, low and concerned. "Oh my gosh, Mum, are you sure?" "Absolutely. I have bank statements, transfer records, everything documented." "He said you're confused, that you're imagining things." Of course he said that, I thought. That's how it starts. Questioning the person's sanity, making everyone question their perception of reality. "Lisa, I worked with numbers all my life. I may be older, but I know how to recognize when someone is diverting my money." I heard her take a deep breath. "I'm booking a flight tomorrow. I need to see this with my own eyes." When I hung up, I felt the first glimmer of hope in days. Regardless of what happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone anymore. The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. Richard was at the door, with Carla right behind him. Their faces showed a mix of rage and false concern when they saw Lisa open it. "What are you doing here?" he asked abruptly. "Visiting our mother," Lisa replied coldly. "Something you should try doing without bringing her paperwork to sign." His face turned red. "What are you talking about? Who filled your head with that nonsense?" "Bank statements aren't nonsense, Richard," I responded, appearing behind Lisa. "Nor are the adulterated deeds or the altered insurance policies." "Can we come in and talk like adults?" Carla intervened, her professional smile firmly in place. "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We let them in, but we didn't invite them to sit." Instead, Lisa placed the folder of documents we had organized on the living room table. "Misunderstanding?" she repeated, opening the folder. "Then explain why $2,500 comes out of Mum's account every month directly into your joint account. Explain why her name was removed as the sole owner of the house she paid for. Explain why you were consulting with realtors to sell this house without her knowledge." Carla's smile wavered. Richard ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he had made since childhood when he was caught in a lie. "We were just organizing everything for the future," he said, his voice lower now. "Mum is getting older. She needs supervision. The financial arrangements were just to make sure everything was in order." "What order?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "The order where you two control everything and I don't have access to my own accounts. The order where you can decide to sell my house behind my back." "We weren't going to sell without telling you," Carla exclaimed. "We were just exploring options for when you might need more intensive care." "And when would that be?" Lisa asked. "When you two decided it was time. When the house was worth more. When you needed the money for something." Richard stepped forward, pointing his finger at Lisa. "You have no right to question our intentions. You're miles away. You show up once a year at Thanksgiving while we're here daily taking care of her." "Taking care or looting?" Lisa countered. "Enough." My voice cut through the argument. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised by the volume and the force. "I'm not a child for you to fight over how to care for me. I am an adult, with all my rights and mental faculties intact. And I am informing you too," I said, looking directly at Richard and Carla, "that I have hired an attorney. I want all my money back. I want my name restored as the sole owner of the house. I want all powers of attorney and authorizations revoked." Richard paled. "You hired an attorney? Against your own son? Against people who abused my trust?" I corrected. "The fact that one of them is my son only makes it more painful, not less wrong." Carla let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is ridiculous. We were just trying to help. If you want to be ungrateful after everything we did, fine. Let's go, Richard." She turned to leave, but Richard remained motionless, his eyes fixed on mine. "Do you really believe we stole from you?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I don't believe. I know. I have the evidence right here." He looked at the documents on the table, then back at me. Something in his eyes shifted. It wasn't repentance exactly, but maybe the first glimmer of understanding. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "Return what you took. Sign the documents Dr. Salas will prepare. Respect my autonomy from now on." "And if I don't?" "Then we will face a judge," I replied simply, "and all of this evidence will be presented in court." Carla, who was at the door, backed up a few steps. "You're lying. You wouldn't sue your own son." I looked at her with a calm that surprised even myself. "Try me." After they left, Lisa hugged me tightly. "Mom, you were incredible." I returned the hug, feeling the trembling in my legs now that the adrenaline was starting to drop. "I'm tired of being seen as weak just because I'm old. Tired of pretending I don't see what's happening for fear of causing problems." "You were never weak," Lisa said. "You were just too kind. There's a difference." That night, while Lisa slept in her old room, I stood on the balcony looking at the stars. I thought about Charles and what he would say about all this. He always had a complicated relationship with Richard. He loved him deeply, but was often frustrated with his selfishness. "You have to be tougher with him," Charles used to say, "or one day he's going to believe the world owes him everything." It seemed that day had arrived, and Richard had decided I was the first creditor to be collected from. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, affidavits, and document review. Dr. Salas worked with impressive efficiency, sending formal letters of notification to Richard and Carla, the bank, the insurance companies, and the registry of deeds. "The important thing now is to establish a clear record of your objections to everything that was done without your informed consent," she explained. "This strengthens our case, regardless of whether we go to a settlement or to court." Lisa extended her stay for one more week, helping to organize papers and serving as a witness for new documents. Before leaving, she introduced me to a friend who worked as a social worker specializing in the elderly. Martha can help you connect with support groups, Lisa explained. People who went through similar situations. Initially, I resisted the idea. I didn't consider myself a vulnerable senior needing a support group, but after Lisa's gentle insistence, I agreed to at least meet Martha. It was one of the best decisions I made. Martha was an energetic woman in her 50s, with a contagious laugh and zero patience for sentimentality. "What your son did is criminal," she said directly at our first meeting, "but unfortunately it is also incredibly common. You are not alone in this fight." She invited me to a meeting of what she informally called the Resistance Club, a group of older adults who had faced or were facing financial abuse by family members. At first, I sat silently in the circle, listening to stories that resonated painfully with mine. A 75-year-old woman whose nephew had mortgaged her house without her knowledge. An 83-year-old man whose son had emptied his retirement savings. A 70-year-old widow whose daughter had sold her family jewelry while she was in the hospital. "The worst part isn't the money," said Vera, an elegant woman of 81 who would become one of my closest friends. "It's the betrayal. It's hearing, 'You should be grateful,' when we question. It's being treated like incompetent children by people we raised." I nodded, feeling tears in my eyes for the first time since it all began. Until that moment, I had been so focused on action, on practical responses, that I hadn't truly processed the emotional pain of the situation. "My son said I should be grateful that he even answers my calls," I shared, my voice trembling, as if it were an extraordinary favor, not basic human decency. Vera placed her hand over mine. "And what did you answer?" "At the moment, nothing. I was in shock, but now I'm answering with actions." A small smile appeared on her face. "Good. The best response to 'you should be grateful' is to show exactly what you're capable of." The group became my refuge in the months that followed. There was no need to explain or justify my pain. Everyone understood. Everyone had experienced that toxic mix of infantilization and exploitations that seemed especially reserved for older people. More importantly, the group helped me see that what was happening wasn't my fault. It wasn't the result of some failure of mine as a mother. It was part of a larger pattern, a social dynamic that allowed and sometimes even encouraged the abuse of the elderly. One afternoon, as I was leaving a group meeting, I found Richard waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car. My heart raced, but I kept my posture erect and kept walking. "Mum," he called, "can we talk?" I stopped a few feet from him. "About what?" "About all this lawsuit, these accusations." "They're not accusations, Richard. They are documented facts." He sighed deeply. "Look, maybe I overreached in trying to help, but it wasn't my intention to hurt you." "Intention doesn't change the result," I replied. "And the result was that you abused my trust and tried to take control of my life without my consent. Is that how you see it?" His voice rose slightly. "After everything I did for you over the last few years, the visits, the shopping, fixing things around the house, things you did voluntarily, as a son, not as a payment that gave you the right to control my life." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Carla and I separated. The revelation caught me off guard. "I'm sorry to hear that." "It's your fault, you know," he continued, the bitterness evident in his voice. "This lawsuit, this elder attorney, Carla said she wasn't going to stick around to see her career destroyed by accusations of fraud." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to accept the blame he was trying to put on my shoulders. Your actions have consequences, Richard. If your marriage was so fragile that it couldn't withstand you being held accountable for those actions, the problem is not the lawsuit. His eyes widened, unaccustomed to this kind of resistance from me. I had always been the conciliatory mother, the one who gave in to keep the peace. "What happened to you?" he finally asked, almost whispering. "I woke up," I replied simply. I realized that I deserve more than forced gratitude for scraps of consideration. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of family dynamics floating between us. "Dr. Salas sent the documents to your lawyer," I finally said. "Revocation of power of attorney, restoration of the house title, restitution plan for the funds." He nodded stiffly. "I saw it. Are you going to sign?" Richard looked at the ground, then back at me. "Do I have a choice?" "We always have choices, son. I choose no longer to be treated as incompetent. You can choose to do what is right, or face a judge." When he didn't answer, I turned to leave. "Mom," he called, his voice suddenly less confident. "After I sign, after everything is resolved, will we still be family?" The question caught me off guard. I stopped, but didn't turn around. "That depends more on you than on me," I finally replied. "Family is more than blood, Richard. It is respect, trust, honor. You broke all of that. And it can't be fixed." The vulnerability in his voice almost made me turn. "Maybe. With time. With genuine actions, not empty words or false apologies." I kept walking to my car, feeling his eyes on my back. I didn't look back. In the following weeks, the legal process moved with surprising speed. Perhaps because the evidence was so clear, or perhaps because Richard finally realized the gravity of what he had done. He signed all the documents without further resistance. The deed to my house was restored, with my name as the sole owner. The automatic bank transfers were formally cancelled, and Richard agreed to a restitution plan for the funds he had diverted. The insurance policies were corrected, and the powers of attorney revoked. "It's a faster resolution than many cases I see," Dr. Salas commented at our final meeting. "There's usually a lot more resistance, especially from children who genuinely believe they are acting in their parents' best interest." "Richard knows what he did," I replied. "Deep down, he always knew." I left her office with a sense of conclusion, but not of triumph. There were no real winners in this situation. I had regained my financial autonomy, but at an immense emotional cost. A distant son, a relationship perhaps irretrievably damaged. At the group meeting that week, I shared the resolution of my case. "It's a victory," said Martha, the coordinator. "We must celebrate every victory, even the bittersweet ones." Vera, who had become my confidant, squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" "Empty," I admitted. "Relieved, but empty." "It's normal," she replied. "You're grieving, not for the loss of money or assets, but for the loss of the illusion that your son would never hurt you that way." Her words resonated deeply. It was exactly that. Grief. Grief for the relationship we thought we had, for the trust I believed existed, for the security of knowing my son saw me as a complete person, not just as a burden or a resource. "When my daughter did something similar," Vera continued, "I spent months wondering where I had failed as a mother, what I could have done differently, so that she didn't grow up believing she had the right to make decisions for me, to treat me like an incompetent child." I nodded, recognizing my own thoughts in her words. "And did you come to any conclusion?" I asked. "Yes," she replied with a small smile. "I concluded that the question was wrong. It wasn't about what I had done as a mother. It was about the choices she made as an adult. about the society that normalizes the lack of respect for older people, about a system that confuses aging with incompetence. After the meeting, I walked to the nearby park in San Diego and sat on a bench watching the children in the playground. Young parents watched attentively, assisting when necessary, but mainly allowing the little ones to explore on their own, even if it meant occasional falls and scraped knees. That's how I had tried to raise Richard and Lisa, providing support, but allowing independence. Helping, but not controlling. Where had it gone wrong with Richard? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lisa. "How are you, Mum?" Her voice sounded concerned, even from miles away. "I'm fine, dear. The documents were all signed. Legally, everything is resolved." "And emotionally?" I hesitated. "Complicated. I have good days and tough days." "You did the right thing," she reassured me. "What Richard did, I can't even imagine how he thought that was acceptable." "He thought I wouldn't notice," I replied. "Or worse, he thought I should be grateful for his help, even when that help was exploitation." We were silent for a moment. The gravity of the situation floated between us. "Richard called me yesterday," Lisa finally said. My heart raced. "What did he want?" "To talk about you, actually. He sounded different, less defensive. He said he's starting therapy." "Therapy?" I repeated, surprised. "Yes. Apparently, the divorce and this whole legal process forced him to face some things about himself. He mentioned that the therapist suggested he might have unresolved issues with money and control." I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing this information. Richard, in therapy, confronting his internal demons. It was more than I expected, honestly. "He asked if I thought you would agree to talk to him at some point," Lisa continued. "Not now, but maybe in the future, when things hurt less." "What did you say?" "I said that depended entirely on you, that you had every right to set boundaries after what happened." I smiled slightly, grateful for my daughter's firmness. "Thank you for respecting that. Always, Mum. You deserve respect, not forced gratitude, but genuine respect." After hanging up, I continued sitting on the bench, watching the clouds pass. The idea of Richard in therapy, acknowledging his problems, was a small ray of hope in a sky previously completely clouded. It didn't mean everything was forgiven or forgotten. It didn't mean trust could be instantly restored. But it was a beginning, a hesitant first step on a long road. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, not just financially, but socially and emotionally. I continued attending the support group, where I found not only understanding, but true friendships. I started taking watercolor classes at the local community center in Seattle, something I had always wanted to try, but never found time for during my working years. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered once a week in a literacy program for children, where my experience was valued, not dismissed. Slowly, I rebuilt a sense of purpose and identity, separate from just being a mother or a widow. I became Helen again, complete, capable, alive. One afternoon, 3 months after the legal resolution, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Richard standing there, holding a small vase of violets, my favorite flowers. "Can I come in?" he asked, without the defensive tone that had characterized our recent interactions. I hesitated for a moment, then I opened the door wider. "For a quick cup of coffee." While I prepared the coffee in the kitchen, I watched him look around the living room, noticing the changes I had made. The new watercolors on the walls, the reading nook I had created by the window, The absence of the family photos that used to dominate the space. "Your house is different," he commented when I returned with 2 cups. "I am different," I replied, sitting in the chair opposite the couch where he was. He nodded, accepting the cup I offered. "Lisa told me you're painting now. Watercolor. I'm not very good yet, but I'm enjoying the process." We stood in an awkward silence for a few moments, both conscious of the chasm between us. "I'm in therapy," he finally said, "twice a week." Lisa mentioned it. "How's it going?" He looked at his cup. "Hard. Revealing. I'm discovering patterns. Things about myself I didn't want to see. The therapist believes I have issues with money and control, that I use them as substitutes for genuine emotional connection." He paused, swallowing with difficulty. "Apparently, it's common in people who grew up with financial insecurity." I thought about the difficult years after Charles's death, the bills piling up, the overtime I worked, the way I always made sure Richard and Lisa never knew how precarious our situation sometimes was. "I never wanted you to worry about money when you were kids," I said softly. "I know. You always protected us. You always put our needs first." He looked at me directly. "But maybe I absorbed more than you thought. The anxiety, the fear, and instead of confronting them in a healthy way, I transformed them into a need to control everything around me." "Including your aging mother," I added, without accusation in my voice, just stating a fact. He nodded, the shame evident on his face. "Including you. The irony is that I always told myself I was protecting you, taking care of you, but I was really trying to control something that made me anxious. The idea of you getting older, of perhaps one day needing real care, and instead of talking to me about those concerns, you decided to just take over." "Yes," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "And when you resisted, when you questioned, I got furious, as if you were being ungrateful for not appreciating my sacrifice." "You should be grateful that we even answer your calls," I quoted the still painful words. He closed his eyes briefly, the guilt clearly visible. "There is no excuse for that. It was cruel and manipulative, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry." It was the first time he had truly apologized, without justifications or mitigating explanations. Just a clear acknowledgement of the mistake and the harm caused. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot to hear it." "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he continued. "I know that will take time, if it ever comes. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did, and how I can become a better person." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions, caution, hope, a pang of sadness for what we had lost. "I'm proud of you for seeking help," I finally said. "That takes courage." A small smile appeared on his face. "I learned from you. You were always the bravest person I know." When he got up to leave, a few minutes later, we stood awkwardly at the door, neither of us sure how to say goodbye. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too intimate for where we were. "Can I call from time to time?" he asked. "Just to talk. No agenda, no attempts to help." I considered for a moment. "You can. I don't promise to always answer, but you can call." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "It's more than I deserve." After he left, I sat down again, looking at the violets he had left. They were beautiful, delicate, but surprisingly resilient, just like the fragile hope that was beginning to blossom in my heart. 18 months passed since that fateful phone conversation. 18 months since I heard my son say I should be grateful that he even answered my calls. A lifetime in some respects, just a moment in others. On a sunny spring Sunday, my house was full of voices, laughter, and the aroma of fresh coffee. The support group that had been my refuge in the toughest times was gathered to celebrate Vera's 83rd birthday, and she was more vibrant than ever. "Who would have thought," she commented as I poured more coffee, "that a group formed because of family betrayals would become our new family?" I looked around the room. At Martha, at Manny, at the other group members who had become dear friends. People who understood, without need for explanation, the complex path we had travelled. People who would never ask why we weren't grateful for the treatment we received. "The family we choose," I replied, raising my cup in a toast. The doorbell rang and I went to open it, finding Lisa at the door with her husband and children. Behind them, more hesitantly, was Richard. "Hope you don't mind," Lisa said, hugging me. "We found Richard in the parking lot. He said you had invited him for lunch too." "I did invite him," I confirmed, opening the door wider. "Everyone come in." The last few months had brought gradual changes in my relationship with Richard. Not a complete reconciliation. Some wounds were too deep to heal entirely, but a careful reconstruction, brick by brick. His therapy continued, mine too. Sometimes we had joint sessions, unraveling decades of complicated family dynamics under the patient guidance of a therapist. When I walked into the living room, introducing my biological family to my resistance club, as Martha jokingly called our group, I felt a strange sense of completeness. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because every person in that room represented an important part of my journey. Vera, who taught me that resilience was not just surviving, but thriving. Martha, who showed me that it's never too late to discover new aspects of myself. Manny, whose friendship had blossomed into a relationship neither of us expected in our golden years. Lisa, whose unwavering loyalty had been my foundation in the toughest moments. Her children, my grandchildren, who reminded me that life continues, constantly renewing itself. And Richard, my son who had done terrible things for complicated reasons, my son who was fighting to be better, to understand his own demons, my son who had learned, painfully, that love without respect is not real love. While everyone talked, mixing with initial curiosity and then with increasing animation, Richard approached me in the kitchen where I was preparing more appetizers. "It's an interesting group," he commented, nodding toward Vera and the others. "They seem to genuinely appreciate you." "They know me," I replied simply. "Not just the idea of me or the version of me they wish me to be. They see me as I am." He nodded, helping me place the appetizers on a tray. "I'm trying to do that too, see you as you are, not as I thought you needed me to be." I looked at him, this adult man who was once the small child who held my hand so tight on the first day of school. This man who had hurt me so deeply and who was now trying, day after day, to repair the damage he had caused. "I know you are," I acknowledged, "and I appreciate the effort." "It's not effort," he said, surprising me. "It's growth, painful sometimes,